Welcome to episode 114 of the Family Answer Man podcast. Today we were talking about the danger of the paranoid neighbor from a biblical worldview on the Family Answer Man. I am joined by Dr. Mark Crosby. He is an educator, he is a pastor, he is a mental health professional, and he is our resident expert here on the Family Answer Man podcast. I am glad to be back with you today. I'm your host, David Orgis, and today we are talking about the dangers of a paranoid neighbor. But first, before we get into the show, I want to ask you if you would just for a second, if you would subscribe and hit that notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode of the Family Answer Man. That would be fantastic. And if you're listening on a podcast, whatever your favorite podcast app is, if you would rate us and review our show, that gets us up to the top of people's feed, and that helps us out a lot, as you can imagine. And as always, you can help grow the Family Answer Man community by inviting your family and your friends, sharing the show with them so they can join you on this journey of building stronger, healthier, happier families. Well, Dr. Mark, it's good to be here with you again today. Special thanks to Trent Barnett, who was our guest host.
Did a good job.
Yeah, he did a great job, and I was thankful that he was able to fill in. But good to be back.
Yes.
And answer some questions from our Family Answer Man audience. And if you have a question and you would like to have that answered, you can email us. Email us your questions at familyanswerman@liveoak.church, familyanswerman@liveoak.church, and that gets your questions to us.
Right.
Today we're talking about a fun topic, maybe.
Yes.
The danger of a paranoid neighbor.
Yeah.
And I think possibly we've all dealt with a neighbor that's been at least difficult, or possibly even a paranoid neighbor. Do you have any personal experience with that?
Fortunately, we've been blessed.
That's
We've
good.
been blessed. Almost my entire life, we've had good neighbors. And I'm very grateful for that, very blessed for that, because the reality is, we'll say more about this in a moment, but good neighbors are, again, like family. You know, if they are involved in your life, they're helpful, they're there, maybe when you're not feeling well, they pick up your newspaper back in the day, or if something's going on, they bring you food or whatever. Where I grew up, it snowed every so often. They'd help you, kind of clear your driveway if it was, snowed in. And so our good neighbors, have always been a blessing. And even today, we were very blessed to have good neighbors. People who will watch out for you, during storms or during whatever concern may be happening in your community. They're there to kind of encourage you. If there's a tree down or limbs all over the place, they kind of help pick up, So again, having good neighbors has always been a great blessing. But on the flip side of that, I've had colleagues, friends, family who've had bad neighbors. And the stories they tell are just so egregious and horrendous that you're just kind of like, so much more thankful that you've been blessed with good neighbors. Because again, a bad neighbor can really make life miserable from the time you get up to the time you go to bed, and even during the night. If they have their lights on, or they have their light shining in your back window, or if they have guests over that are a little rambunctious or whatever it may be, it can really cause a lot of stress and consternation for your family. So bad neighbors are very unfortunate, and they can create a lot of stress within the family.
Yeah, and I know even people have said, "Oh man, we're ready to put our house up for sale."
I've seen that. I've seen people sell, unfortunately, their dream home just to get away from their bad neighbors, or out of a neighborhood that has several bad neighbors. And it's unfortunate, but some have had to do that.
Well, hopefully you have good neighbors, and if you don't, hopefully this episode will help you out a little bit. Our question that is written in today says this. It says, "My family is concerned about a neighbor who is constantly accusing us of trespassing if a ball rolls into his yard, or threatening to call the police if our music's too loud, or states he stares at us over the fence if we're out on our patio, or accuses us of stealing things if he can't find something, and has even accused us of having an affair with his wife. He yells out at our kids if they have too many friends over and they get too loud. What's wrong with this guy, and what can we do about it?"
Wow, there's a lot there, right? Again, as we said before, bad neighbors can be very difficult and make life very difficult and stressful. And so, unfortunately, though, whenever you hear of someone who has a hard time getting along with other people, having a hard time playing well with others, if you will, having a hard time connecting, being considerate, being willing to communicate, being cooperative, whatever. Generally, there is some sort of some sort of personality problem. In this case, it sounds like there's a paranoid personality disorder going on. We can't say that for sure because we don't know this person. But
Right.
based on what they're saying, based on the description they're giving, it sounds like a person who may have a paranoid personality problem, disorder, or tendency. As we said earlier, having good neighbors and being a good neighbor is essential. Most of our listening audience are Christians, and so we hear about the importance of loving your neighbor,
Right.
as yourself. Being the good neighbor. But a bad neighbor, as we said a moment ago, can make life miserable. Now, again, if they are saying things and doing things that you feel that are threatening, if they are saying things or doing things that you feel like could be impacting your children or even your spouse, saying things, as this person said in this particular question, accusing them of being involved with their wife,
Right.
having an affair. That's pretty serious.
Yeah.
And so bad neighbors can make life extremely difficult, extremely miserable. And so especially so here, if this neighbor has a personality disorder, which sounds like they do, that can be very problematic. So here in this case, if you're kind of just tuning in, the neighbor sounds like someone who suffers from a paranoid personality disorder.
Okay.
And a lot of people aren't quite sure what that means. We
Right.
all have a little idea of what the word paranoia means. All of us have been maybe a little paranoid at times due to certain circumstances and situations. But the reality is that people with a paranoid personality disorder can be very contentious. Sometimes a person with a paranoid personality disorder can be violent, and we'll explain why in a moment. Many times they're passive aggressive. They're the ones who, if you're playing ball in the front yard, they come put the water sprinkler on, kind of thing. They're the ones that maybe will throw your dog something that could make them sick. If the dog is barking, whatever. They sabotage. They can be very vengeful. So the paranoid personality disordered person sometimes can be, again, somewhat contentious and violent. Why? Because the paranoid person has a constant distrust. They are always suspicious, and they think the motives of other people are interpreted to be malevolent.
Okay.
So the point simply is this: they don't trust anyone. And we'll unpack that more in just a moment, but it could be because of experiences in their own life. In some cases, it could be the profession they're in. Maybe they're in a profession that sees the worst of people. Maybe they're in a profession that has had to deal with, the most difficult of people. And so what happens is that kind of carries over from their professional life into their personal life. They maybe experience distrust early on as a child. I had a colleague say to me one time that when he was, about 10, 11 years old, his dad was working on something, and long story short, he told his son, "Hey, climb this ladder and pick up this or that," and off this tree limb or whatever. And so the little boy climbed up the ladder, not very far up, but maybe 3 or 4 rungs. And then the father says, "Hey, look, I want you to fall back, and I'm gonna catch you." And so the little boy goes, "Okay," and he's not very high up, but 2 or 3, 4 rungs. So the little boy goes back, and the dad just lets him hit the ground.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the father's message was never trust anyone.
Sheesh. That's not what a father's supposed to teach their
No,
son.
no, definitely. And so this colleague
Wow.
said, "I cannot tell you how that impacted my life.
Oh, I can imagine.
I cannot tell you how I became the most distrustful person on the planet." So the point is that we all have our experiences of distrust. We all have our experiences where we become paranoid over certain situations. For some people, it's a genetic, inherited situation. So again, people ask, so what are the traits of the paranoid person?
Yeah.
What are the characteristics?
How do you recognize
How do you
this?
recognize it? And so I like the acronym SUSPECT.
Okay.
Okay.
That sounds perfect for this disorder.
It really is. But you can remember the various traits by taking the acronym SUSPECT and then breaking it down with these 7 characteristics. Number 1, they're suspicious. They're suspicious of others, and they feel exploited by others. And because they are suspicious of others and because they feel exploited by others, they'll often lash out and accuse you.
Okay.
So the first thing of the paranoid person, they're always suspicious. And so they're always watching you. They're always looking to see what you're going to do. They're always watching and waiting to see how you're going to do something that's going to affirm their suspicion. If for some reason this neighbor feels like his garbage can was moved, he's going to watch you as you take your garbage out to see if you go through his garbage can or whatever. They're constantly trying to confirm and affirm their suspicions. So number one, they're suspicious. Number two, they're unforgiving. The paranoid person holds grudges. They will always see you as the person who, again, cut grass over your line, okay? And so they're unforgiving. Or if you did not return something that you borrowed, when you said you would, you say, hey, I'm going to just borrow your weed eater for just 5 minutes, and you took it for 5 hours. And now you are constantly going to be the person who does not do what they say. So you're, they're unforgiving. They hold grudges. Number three, they suspect their spouse is unfaithful. The paranoid person, one of the key concerns is that they suspect their spouse being unfaithful. They're very hard to live with, very hard to be married to. Or in some cases, if they're not married, all their friends are disloyal. Even though they have very few friends, the friends they do have, they feel like could instantly become disloyal. So again, they are unforgiving. They're a suspect of their spouse being unfaithful. The letter P, if you're following this acronym, SUSP, and that is they perceive everything as an attack. Anything you do is an attack. If you have more than a few friends over and you're having a gathering in the backyard or whatever on your patio, you're being loud on purpose. You're being loud to keep them from having any kind of rest. You're being loud on purpose, and now you are now the enemy. They perceive everything as an attack. Or if you get a little dog, it's because you don't like them, and you know that dog's going to be barking all night long or whatever. So everything you do is perceived as an attack by the person with the paranoid personality disorder. E, in this acronym, they see most everyone as an enemy. Everyone is basically an enemy. No one's to be trusted. Everyone's to be suspect. Everything is an attack. And so therefore, everyone's an enemy. And even some of their family members, and even sometimes their people in their own nuclear family, sometimes they'll see them as the enemy. Because again, they're out, someone's out to do them wrong. Someone's out to hurt them. Someone's out to take advantage of them. Someone's out to abuse them. And so they see almost everyone as the enemy. C, in this acronym, they confide in no one. So if you're just joining in, we're talking about the paranoid personality neighbor. And the letter C means they confide in no one. They let no one know their concerns or their feelings or their beliefs or what bothers them or what they enjoy. Because if someone knows something too much about them, now they're vulnerable. And the last thing a paranoid person wants to ever be is vulnerable.
Right, and it goes back to the trust issues.
Exactly. Yeah. And then last of all, in this acronym of suspect, the letter T is threats. Threats are always perceived. So they always see actions and behaviors of everyone around them as some sort of threat. So they live in this constant state of being suspect. Okay, this is the acronym.
SUSPECT.
Right.
Find out what it means to me.
Exactly. So again, kind of rehash that. They're suspicious of others. They're unforgiving and hold grudges. They're suspect of their spouse as being unfaithful. They perceive everything as an attack. They see everyone as an enemy. They confide in no one, and threats are always perceived. So that is the acronym suspect of the paranoid person. So hopefully you can remember that. Pastors, if you want to use that as a sermon outline, dealing with the paranoid people in the scripture, and there were many.
I was going to say there are a few.
And so if you're doing a study on Bible characters, but anyway, the point simply is this. This is how this person operates. So these individuals make really bad neighbors. And so if you're unfortunate enough to have a neighbor who struggles with paranoid personality disorder, these are some of the things you're going to start seeing. These are some of the traits that you'll notice. Some more than others. Sometimes, again, these individuals may not come across as blatant as others. But in this particular question, this person writes in that their neighbor is consistently accusing them of trespassing when a ball rolls into the front yard. That's what these people do. Yeah. So the kids are playing ball in the front yard. You kick the soccer ball or whatever rolls in the yard. And now the moment you cross into my yard, it's trespassing. And so this is the kind of person who calls the police. This is the kind of person that takes pictures. This is the kind of person that wants to gather enough evidence to show the DA or to show the sheriff's deputy or to show someone that you're trespassing, you're causing problems. I've even had one person say to me recently about their neighbor that this person knows exactly the code that is allowed for decibels as far as loudness in that community.
Oh my gosh.
And they have an app on their phone that can rate the decibels, if you will, if something is too loud. So if somebody's playing some music, or if somebody is using a machine, or if somebody is using some sort of motor or whatever, maybe even a lawnmower or whatever, if it reaches a certain decibel, this person will then call the police because they know the exact number of what is allowed in their particular neighborhood.
Wow.
These are the people who go by the rules of the homeowners association. And if you get a boat and you don't have that boat in the garage and you leave that boat out in the front yard or in the driveway, whatever, they're the ones who face you at the homeowners associational meeting. They're the ones who call you out. They're the ones who call the sheriff's deputies. They're the ones. And so it's kind of like they're constantly being fueled by this contentious, behavior and situations.
I can imagine this makes for a really contentious and uncomfortable household then.
Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, many times these people have problems in their own marriages. They have problems with their own kids. They have problems within their own family. But here's the thing. This is their way of coping with that. In other words, they would rather solve, if you will, other people's problems or point other people's problems out, maybe it's a better way of putting it, not solve them, but they would rather point out the problems of other people. They would rather try to correct other people's behaviors, maybe a better way of putting it, than correct their own. So this is their way of dealing with maybe their own conflict and truculence that's going on inside their own family system. So what's the result? Yeah. What is the result of a person like this? The person with the paranoid personality disorder, the neighbor. Paranoid people feel unsafe. So again, as we were saying a while ago, they feel unsafe in their own home. They feel unsafe in their neighborhood, and so they're constantly trying to figure out ways of making themselves feel safe. So if no one comes to my yard, if I tell everybody where the boundaries are, if I correct everyone for driving too fast in the neighborhood or whatever, then I have some sort of control. So paranoid people feel unsafe. Second of all, they feel isolated because they are. They have very few friends. They're always on guard, and they're always out to get you before you get them.
Wow.
So that's how they live their life. Again, they're isolated, very few friends, very few people that's really involved in their life. They're always on guard, always looking to see what's going to happen next, always looking to see who's going to take advantage of them, and they're always concerned about who's out to get them. And so what they'll do is they'll become proactive. I'm going to get you before you get me. I'm going to call the cops on you before you call the cops on me. I'm going to be the one who creates the problem, if you will. I'm going to be the one who basically becomes argumentative. I'm going to be the one who says you're wrong before you can say that I'm wrong. They have very few friends, as we said a while ago. They may appear as confident. They may appear as being the self-made person. They may also appear as threatening, but really down deep, the paranoid person, obviously, is a very frightened, very scared person. Again, they're very argumentative and they're very domineering. And this is why, again, they make for really poor neighbors. Now, this is something that we have to be mindful of, the paranoid person, the paranoid personality disorder person. Sometimes they may have brief psychotic episodes where they may really go off. So if a child runs into their yard to pick up their ball, this is the kind the kind of person that sometimes, and I've heard of these stories, where the person comes out with maybe a belt in their hand, wanting to spank the kid for trespassing or whatever. They have this psychotic break, if you will, where they see this little child going into the yard to retrieve their ball as somehow going to now destroy their rose bushes or mess up their lawn, or some sort of, again, psychotic, belief that something other than just a little child getting their ball. And so they may have this psychotic episode. So again, the paranoid personality person, if you're not careful, in some cases, not all, they can be, again, very irrational in their thinking. They can be very violent in their behavior. They can have this psychotic episode, and they can be very delusional in their thinking. If they believe that their wife is having an affair with their neighbor, they will make the world aware of that. They're the ones who goes on social media and they say all kind of crazy things about their spouse. They're the ones who go on social media and say all kind of crazy things about their neighbor. And so they become and they believe this. They are very delusional in their thinking and also very vengeful in their behavior. So often they're involved in overt aggression. As I said before, they will attack. They're the ones who will come over, and if your music's too loud, they will, destroy your stereo system or whatever, knock out the speakers. They'll do that kind of thing. Or they may call the police on you for something that you have not done that would be illegal. They're the ones who will file a suit against you, even in small claims court. Sometimes they'll have covert aggression. In other words, this is a kid
explain covert aggression, because most people they don't know that term.
This is a person who will poison the dog and you don't know it. This is the person that will pour a weed killer on your plants or on your shrubs if one of the branches crosses over into their property line. They're the ones, unfortunately, I've heard of this too. They're the ones who will put tacks in the street in front of your driveway. Okay. These individuals, again, not all of them are this aggressive or this dangerous or whatever, but there is a population of the paranoid personality disorder person who thinks in these terms.
Right, and it's different. That's covert aggression is different than passive aggressive, and it's different than direct, just confrontational aggression.
Right, exactly. And what will happen is that if the confrontational aggression for them is not getting what they want, or if they feel like nothing is happening, the police say, "Hey, look, don't call us anymore.
Right.
Your neighbors aren't breaking the law.
I'm not getting justice.
Whatever." Then they will take the law into their own hands, if you will. So again, they will put tacks in front of your driveway in the street. They won't put it in your driveway, because if they do, they know that you can come against them for trespassing or putting things on their property. But if they throw tacks in the street, then in their way of thinking, they can't be caught, if you will. They'll look through your garbage to see if there's any clues of behaviors that they are concerned about or believe are happening. So what can be done? This is the $6 million question, right?
Other than move, what can we do?
Other than move, and that sometimes is an option. But there's about 10 things we're going to look at real quickly with our time left. So if you're just joining us, we're looking at the paranoid personality disordered neighbor and what to do when you have this kind of neighbor who's making your life miserable. 10 things that can be done. Number one, confront them, ask them to discuss this situation, be conversational one time.
Okay.
The reason why is because 90% of the time it will do little good, because they have no desire to cooperate. The paranoid person has no desire to communicate with you about solving a problem, and they do not want to be considerate of you. So again, but do confront them so that you can say that you did. Do ask them if we can solve this problem. Do converse with them. I had one friend of mine said, look, I said to my neighbor, he said, as summer was beginning and we were having friends over, I asked my neighbor who struggled with this paranoid personality disorder, and it was a bad neighbor. He said, I asked my neighbor, is this going to be a good summer or a bad summer? And I love that line.
Right.
Is this going to be a good summer or a bad summer? And so, but you do that one time. Number two, again, most of our listening audience are Christians, so do something nice. But beware that even then, by doing something nice for your neighbor, baking them some cookies or whatever, even then, 90% of the time they will see it as a ploy.
Right.
And they may turn it back against you. So if you, for example, back in the day when they had delivered papers, if you put their paper on the front step, which we used to do years ago, they would say, oh, what you did now is trespass, so I'm getting you for trespassing, even though you're trying to do something nice.
Yeah.
Thirdly, know your rights and know the law.
Okay.
You need to know the law. And you need to know what your rights are, whether it be your homeowners association or whatever, but know your rights and know the law. Fourthly, you may need to put up a security fence. Sometimes, again, I've heard of people say, well, things like we had this little cyclone fence, but our neighbor would stand by their fence and just look at us and stare at us. You know,
so weird.
I think we see this in this question.
Yeah.
Well, they do that to intimidate. You may need to put up cameras. So that you can have a record, if you will, if somebody does do something that is considered illegal, egregious, harmful. If the dog gets sick, if your plants all of a sudden start dying, you may have to have cameras so that if you do have to file any charges, you'll have evidence to do so. You hate to do that, but it's important. Number 6, if you're keeping count, you may need to get a dog that's trained. By that I mean this, a dog that doesn't bark at everything all the time, but a dog that also will listen to your command, but a dog that will also keep someone from coming into your yard or doing something to your property or something along those lines.
Right, especially if you have little kids.
Especially if you have little kids, exactly. But get a dog that is trained. Number 7, you may need to keep law enforcement involved. So they may record, so they can have a record of what is being shared, and they can have a record they can review in the event this ever goes to court. But again, sometimes it's good to have law enforcement involved. And unfortunately, law enforcement, they know these people, okay? They know their story. They have been called before, right. They've either been called by the paranoid person or they've had other neighbors call about the paranoid person.
Yeah, and they know how to handle these people as well.
And they do.
They
do. And in some cases, the paranoid person, may, to some small degree, respect the law enforcement. Keep things under lock and key. If you have a shed, if you have a garage, keep things under lock and key, because even though they expect you to respect their stuff, they may not respect yours. Do not get involved in a verbal altercation. They love a verbal altercation.
So it kind of goes back to number 1.
Yeah, so don't get involved in a verbal altercation. And last of all, number 10, of course, pray. So here's the thing. The least interaction that you have with the paranoid neighbor, the less fuel is given to them. They're energized over conflict. They're energized over altercations because it affirms their paranoia. They can say, you see, I was right. They were stealing my gas can out of my garage. You see, they were borrowing my lawnmower. But if you, again, pull back, you don't fuel their aggression, you don't fuel their paranoia, and you have minimal interaction with them, eventually they will turn their attention to someone else. And they may even move in some cases. Some, less than 5%, will get better. This is especially true if you show acts of kindness during exceptionally hard times. So what I mean by that is this. I call it sprinkling grace. Okay. And I encourage people of all backgrounds to do that. Sprinkle some grace. In other words, you're not setting yourself up for abuse, but you're sprinkling grace on their life. In other words, if they have a flat tire, you help them fix it. If they have lost a loved one, maybe you send over some food or a plant. If their kitchen caught fire, you might make them a meal. If they've lost their job, you might want to pay one of the smaller utility bills. During Christmas, you send a Christmas card. I call this sprinkling grace because, again, it's not setting yourself up for abuse, but you're showing them grace. And it's the story basically of the Grinch and of Scrooge and others, that basically when someone sprinkles grace in their life, it shows them, that you are a follower of the one who gave you grace. It shows your family what grace looks like. And who knows, you just might be able to speak into their heart with God's amazing grace. And hopefully that's what every neighbor needs to do and is called to do. But again, sprinkle that grace, show your family what grace looks like, and let God do the rest.
Well, there you have it from the Family Answer Man, how to handle the danger of the paranoid neighbor Hopefully we as Christians will do that with grace and point people, whether it's our neighbors or our families, to Christ in the process. Thanks for joining us today on The Family Answer Man, and hopefully, as always, this episode will lead you to make changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, happier family.